Chapter 4: The Entire Supreme Command with One Blow. The targeted killings of Hafez and Salah jolted Egyptian military intelligence, and there was a certain reduction in the number of terrorist incursions into Israel. From the Israeli point of view, this was a success. But then the skies over the region grew clouded for a different reason. On July 26, 1956, Egypt's President Gamal Abdel Nasser, acting on an anti-colonialist agenda, nationalized the Suez Canal, the vital shipping link between the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. The shipping link between the British and French governments, whose citizens were the major shareholders in the highly profitable company that operated the waterway, were furious. Israel, for its parts, wished to regain passage through the canal, but at the same time, it also saw an opportunity to deliver a clear message to Egypt, namely, that Nasser would finally pay a heavy price for sending militants into the Gaza Strip to attack Israel, and that his explicit ambitions to destroy the country would be met with a crushing force. This convergence of interest begot a secret alliance between the three countries, with the energetic young Director General of the Israeli Defense Ministry, Shimon Peres, playing a leading part in drawing up an ambitious war plan. Israel would invade the Sinai Peninsula, thus giving French and British a pretext, a crisis threatening the Suez, to also invade. France promised to provide Israel with an air umbrella against attacks from the Egyptian Air Force. Shortly before D-Day, Israel's Amman learned that a delegation that included the powerful Egyptian Chief of Staff, Field Marshal Abd al-Hakim Amr, and many other senior officials had left Cairo by plane for Damascus. An opportunity presented itself. With one precision strike, Israel could eliminate nearly the entire Egyptian military leadership. The Air Force began conducting intensive training in night interception, a difficult operation given the technological capabilities at the time. Ben Gurion and Dayan decided that Israel would do all it could to conceal its involvement and try to make it look as if the plane had crashed because of technical fault. The mission was codenamed Operation Rooster. The Egyptians were expected to make the short flight from Damascus back to Cairo in two Ilyushin IL-14 aircraft. Amman assigned the task of identifying and tracking the air convoy to its signals intelligence unit. The unit, known nowadays as Unit 8200, has already racked up a number of prominent successes in the 1948 and 49 war, and afterward, Amman invested many resources in the development of the unit, which would eventually become the largest, and someday the most important, in the IDF. The investment proved out. A few days before the delegation left Cairo for Damascus, signal intelligence technicians managed to isolate the broadcast frequency the Egyptians were expected to use on the short flight back to Cairo. 20 Israeli radio operators, all under the age of 25, waited tensely at headquarters in Ramat HaSharon, north of Tel Aviv, manning round-the-clock shifts waiting for the Egyptians to leave the tarmac in Damascus. The unit was under intense pressure from high command, as the land invasion of the Sinai Peninsula was planned for October 29th, and the demoralizing chaos of losing its entire senior military staff would put Egyptians at a distinct disadvantage. Time was running out. Days passed slowly, radio operators patiently waiting for a sound in their headsets. Dawn broke on October 28th, the day before 0 hour, and still the Egyptians hadn't left Syria. Finally, at 2 o'clock on the afternoon of October 28th, the signal they were waiting for was picked up. The pilots of the Ilyushin IL-14s were getting ready to leave. Matthias Chateau Berger, commander of the Air Force's 119 Squadron and one of the Air Force's best pilots at the time, was selected for the dramatic mission. At about 8 p.m., signal intelligence informed the Air Force that only one of the two Egyptian Ilyushians had taken off. Still, signal intelligence believed that all of the Egyptian officers were on board. Operation Rooster was a go. Chateau climbed into the Meteor Mk-13 jet and took off with his navigator, Eliashiv Shivi Brosh. It was a particularly dark night, so dark that even the horizon nearly vanished in the blackness. Chateau climbed to 10,000 feet and leveled off. The radar pinged off an approaching plane. Contact, 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 Shivi said over the intercom. 2 o'clock over our altitude. 3 miles head on, moving to 3 o'clock. 4, make a hard right. Slower, you're closing in too fast. Against the massive black sky, Chateau saw tiny orange flares, the 2 flames of the Ilyushians' exhaust pipes. Eye contact, he reported to ground control. I want a positive identification of the craft, said Air Force Commander Dan Tolkowski, who sat at the control center. Positive, beyond all doubt, understand? Chateau veered slightly to the left until he could see light in the windows. Move slightly to the left. Chateau veered slightly to the left until he could see light in the windows of the passenger compartment. The windows of the cockpit were larger than the others. That's a positive identification, Chateau thought. Only an Ilyushin has windows like that. He also made out people in army uniforms walking among the seats. Identification confirmed, he said. Cleared to open fire only if you have no doubt, Tolkowski responded. Roger. Shells erupted from the 4 20mm cannons fitted on the nose of the airplane. Chateau was blinded by an unexpected brilliance. Someone on the ground crew, trying to be helpful, had loaded tracer rounds into the cannons, but the bright flashes on the near-total darkness seared his eyes. Chateau recovered his sight. He saw fire in the sky. Got him. Chateau told ground control, the left engine is in flames and it looks like there is a short circuit because everything is dark. Chateau squeezed the trigger again. The Ilyushin exploded, a fireball in the night, spewing flaming chunks of wreckage. It began to spin downward toward the sea. Did you see it crash? Tolkowski asked Chateau. Tolkowski asked as Chateau pulled his plane out of the spin. Affirmative, crashed, Chateau answered. Chateau brought his plane in on fumes and was greeted on the tarmac by Chief of Staff Moshe Dayan and General Tolkowski, who gave Chateau the news that at the last minute, Amr had apparently decided to wait for the second plane. If there's time, Chateau said, we'll fuel up and go out again. We've considered that, but reached the conclusion that it would look too obvious and would be liable to reveal our intelligence source, Dayan responded. We've decided to let Amr be. Even so, the minute you liquidate the Egyptian general staff, you won half the war. Let's have a drink for the second half. Operation Rooster was without a doubt a superb intelligence and aerial warfare achievement. Indeed, the participants in Operation Rooster later began calling it the downing of the Egyptian general staff, and would claim that the chaos that prevailed in the high command in Cairo had contributed significantly to Israel's victory in what broke out the next day. In the war that broke out the next day. Read poorly. Whether or not the impact was quite as large as these men claimed, the IDF would go on to easily rout the Egyptian army. It put the world on notice. The Jewish state was now a serious fighting force. Ben-Gurion, temporarily in a state of euphoria, sent a public letter to the officers of the soldiers. Ben-Gurion, temporarily in a state of euphoria, sent a public letter to the officers and soldiers of the 9th Brigade talking about the Third Kingdom of Israel.